Javier Torres had always been good at keeping secrets. Growing up in a small Texas town, he learned early to bury parts of himself, his dreams, his desires, the way his heart raced when he saw the quarterback smile in high school. By 30, he'd built a life in San Francisco, a city that promised freedom but often felt like a maze of ambition and facades. He was the newest hire at Nexus Tech, a startup clawing its way to the top of the AI world, and every day was a tightrope walk of proving himself. Marcus Reed, the company's enigmatic CEO, was the kind of man who commanded a room without trying. At 35, he was a paradox, sharp suits and sharper wit, with eyes that seemed to see through people. Javier had noticed him immediately, not just because he was the boss, but because of the way Marcus lingered on him during meetings, a glance that felt like a question neither of them dared to ask. That night, the office was nearly empty, the rest of the team long gone to happy hours or home. Javier stayed late, as always, tweaking code for a project that could make or break his career. Marcus had been in his corner office, the glass walls giving Javier fleeting glimpses of him pacing. Phone pressed to his ear. The deadline for their AI prototype was looming, and the pressure was a living thing, wrapping around them all. Javier, Marcus's voice cut through the silence, low and steady, as he stepped out of his office. "You're still here." Javier looked up, his heart doing that stupid thing it always did when Marcus said his name. "Yeah, just trying to get this algorithm right. You know how it is." He forced a smile, hoping it hid the way his pulse raced. Marcus didn't smile back. Instead, he crossed the room, his steps deliberate, and stopped by Javier's desk. "You work too hard," he said, his tone softer than usual, almost personal. "You don't have to carry the whole company on your shoulders." Javier laughed, a nervous sound. "Says the guy who lives in this office." Marcus's lips twitched, the closest he ever got to a grin. "Fair point." He leaned against the desk, close enough that Javier could smell his cologne, something woodsy, expensive. "But I'm serious." "You're good, Javier. Better than good. You don't need to prove anything to me." The words hit harder than they should have. Javier swallowed, his throat tight. "Thanks," he managed, but his voice cracked, betraying him. He turned back to his screen, hoping Marcus wouldn't notice the flush creeping up his neck. But Marcus didn't move. He stood there, watching, and the air between them thickened, heavy with something Javier couldn't name. Then, without a word, Marcus walked to the office door and turned the lock. The click echoed like a gunshot. Javier's breath caught, his eyes snapping to Marcus, who was already walking back, his expression unreadable. "What were you doing?" Javier asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus didn't answer right away. He stopped in front of Javier, close enough that their knees brushed. "I've been watching you," he said finally, his voice low, almost dangerous. "Not just your work. You." Javier's heart slammed against his ribs. He wanted to laugh it off, to make a joke, but the intensity in Marcus's eyes pinned him in place. "I don't know what you mean," he stammered, though he did. "God, he did." Marcus leaned closer, his hands braced on the desk, caging Javier in. "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur. "I see the way you look at me, the way you stay late, not just for the work. I know, Javier, because I'm doing the same damn thing." The confession hung between them, raw and electric. Javier's mind raced, torn between fear and something hotter, something he'd buried for years. He thought of Texas, of the boy he'd been, of the nights he'd spent dreaming of a moment like this, but never believing it could happen. Not to him, not with someone like Marcus. "Marcus, he stopped, his voice failing him. What could he say? That he'd spent weeks memorizing the way Marcus's jaw tightened when he was stressed? That he'd imagined this exact moment, only to wake up alone, telling himself it was impossible? Marcus's hand moved, tentative at first, brushing against Javier's. The touch was fire, searing through every defense Javier had built. "Tell me to stop," Marcus said, his voice rough, almost pleading. "Tell me, and I'll walk away right now." But Javier didn't. He couldn't. Instead, he turned his hand, lacing their fingers together, and the world tilted. Marcus's breath hitched, and for a moment, they were just two men, stripped of titles and expectations, standing on the edge of something terrifying and beautiful. Then Marcus moved, dropping to one knee in front of Javier's chair, his hands resting on Javier's thighs. The gesture wasn't submission. It was something deeper, a surrender to whatever this was between them. Javier's breath came in shallow gasps, his hands trembling as he reached out, touching Marcus's face, feeling the stubble under his fingertips. "I thought this only lived in my dreams," Javier whispered, his voice breaking. Marcus looked up, his eyes fierce and tender all at once. "So did I." And then, in a locked office, with the city humming beyond the windows, they crossed a line neither could come back from. The next morning, Javier woke in his apartment, the memory of Marcus's touch burning through him. He stared at the ceiling, his heart a mess of hope and dread. What had they done? What did it mean? He wanted to believe it was real, that Marcus felt the same pull he did, but doubt crept in like fog over the bay. At the office, Marcus was all business, his suit impeccable, his voice clipped as he ran the morning meeting. Javier sat across the room, trying to focus, but every glance from Marcus felt like a spark. They hadn't spoken about last night, hadn't had the chance, and the silence was deafening. As the day wore on, Javier noticed the whispers. A coworker, Lena, leaned over during lunch, her voice low. "You hear about Marcus? Word is he's been distracted lately. Investors are getting nervous." Javier's stomach twisted. "Distracted how?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. Lena shrugged. "Dunno. Just off. You'd know better than me, though. You're always here late with him." The words were innocent, but they landed like a punch. Javier forced a smile, excusing himself to the bathroom, where he splashed water on his face and tried to breathe. Was last night a mistake? Had he misread everything? The thought of Marcus pulling away, of this being just a fleeting moment, made his chest ache. But that evening, as the office emptied again, Marcus called him into his office. The door closed, not locked this time, and Marcus looked at him, his expression softer than Javier had ever seen. "We need to talk," Marcus said, and Javier braced himself for the worst. Instead, Marcus stepped closer, his voice low. "Last night, I don't regret it. But this," he gestured between them, "it's complicated. I'm your boss, Javier, and I'm not out. Not to the board, not to anyone." The word stung, but Javier understood. He'd hidden parts of himself for years, too. "So what do we do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Marcus hesitated, then reached for Javier's hand. "We figure out. Together." And in that moment, Javier knew they were in too deep to turn back. The days that followed were a tightrope walk over a chasm of longing and fear. Javier and Marcus moved through the office like planets in orbit, drawn together but never touching, not in public. Every stolen glance, every brush of their hands in the break room, was a secret shared in plain sight, a spark that threatened to ignite everything they'd built. Javier threw himself into his work, hoping the code would drown out the questions in his head. What were they doing? Was this a relationship, a fling, or was something else entirely? Marcus was still his boss, still the man who signed his paychecks, and the power imbalance gnawed at him. Yet every time Marcus lingered by his desk, asking about a line of code, but really asking, "Are you okay?" Javier felt himself falling deeper. One evening, a week after that night, Javier stayed late again, the office bathed in the glow of computer screens. He was debugging a neural network when Marcus appeared, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. "You're gonna burn out, you know," Marcus said, leaning against the doorframe. Javier looked up, his heart skipping. "Hot meat kettle," he shot back, but his voice was soft, teasing. Marcus chuckled, a sound that warmed the room. He crossed to Javier's desk, pulling a chair close. Too close for coworkers, not close enough for what they were becoming. "I'm serious," Marcus said. "You don't have to prove yourself every second. You're already," he trailed off, searching for words. "You're already enough." The sincerity in Marcus's voice cracked something in Javier. He wanted to reach out, to pull Marcus closer, but the glass walls of the office felt like a cage. Instead, he said, "You make it hard to focus, you know that?" Marcus's eyes darkened, a smile tugging at his lips. "Good." They worked side by side for hours, the silence comfortable but charged. When the clock struck midnight, Marcus stood, stretching. "Come on," he said. "Let's get out of here." Javier hesitated. "Where?" "Anywhere but this office." They ended up at a dive bar in a Mission District, the kind of place where neon signs buzzed and the jukebox played old Springsteen. Over cheap beer, Marcus opened up about growing up in Chicago, about the pressure of being the golden boy who had to be perfect, about the years he'd spent hiding who he was. "I've never done this," he admitted, his voice low. "Not like this. Not with someone who matters." Javier's chest tightened. "I matter." Marcus met his eyes, unflinching. "More than you know." The walk back to Javier's apartment was quiet, the city alive around them. At the door, Javier paused, his key in hand. "You want to come up?" he asked, his voice barely steady. Marcus didn't answer with words. He followed Javier inside, and when the door closed, the world outside ceased to exist. They kissed, slow and deliberate, every touch a promise. It wasn't just desire. It was trust, fragile and new, blooming in the space between them. But the real world didn't stay away for long. At Nexus Tech, rumors were spreading. The company was under scrutiny, with investors questioning Marcus's leadership. A rival startup had leaked a similar AI prototype, and the pressure was crushing. Javier overheard whispers in the break room about Marcus's late nights, about his distraction. Lena, the coworker who'd mentioned it before, cornered him one day. "You're close to him, right?" she asked, her eyes sharp. "Is he okay?" "People are talking." Javier's stomach churned. "He's fine," he lied, but the words fell hollow. He wanted to protect Marcus, to shield what they had, but the secrecy was suffocating. He wasn't out at work either, not fully, and the fear of being exposed, of losing his job, his place in this city, kept him up at night. That evening, Marcus called him into his office again. The door stayed open, but the tension was palpable. "We need to be careful," Marcus said, his voice tight. "The board's watching me. If they find out about us." He didn't finish, but Javier understood. "So we hide," he said, the words bitter. "Pretend this isn't happening." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's not what I want, but I can't lose this company. Not now." Javier nodded, but the ache in his chest grew. He wanted to fight for this, for them, but the stakes were too high. "What if we can't keep this up?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Marcus stepped closer, his hand brushing Javier's arm, hidden by the desk. "We will," he said fiercely. "I'm not letting you go." But as Javier left the office that night, the weight of their secret felt heavier than ever. He walked through the city, the lights blurring in his vision, and wondered how long they could keep this dance going before it broke them both. The city pulsed outside Javier's window, but inside his apartment, the world was small, just him and Marcus, tangled in sheets, their breaths mingling in the dark. Every touch was a rebellion against the rules they lived by. Every whisper a defiance of the world that demanded they stay hidden. But the morning always came, and with it, the reminder that love, no matter how fierce, couldn't erase the risks they faced. The next week was chaos at Nexus Tech. The rival startup's prototype was gaining traction, and the board was breathing down Marcus's neck. Meetings stretched late, tempers flared, and Javier felt the strain in every clipped word Marcus spoke. They stole moments when they could, a brush of hands in the elevator, a shared look across the conference room. But the distance between them grew, not because they wanted it, but because the world demanded it. Javier tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting to Marcus, to the way he'd laughed in the dive bar, unguarded for once. to the way his hands felt steady and sure when they were alone. But doubt was a poison, seeping into every thought. What if Marcus decided this was too much? What if the company, the pressure, the secrecy won? One afternoon, Javier overheard a conversation in the hallway. Two senior engineers, oblivious to his presence, were talking about Marcus. "He's slipping," one said. "Too distracted. If he doesn't pull it together, the board's going to replace him." Javier's blood ran cold. He wanted to storm in, to defend Marcus, but what could he say? That Marcus was distracted because of him? That they were falling for each other in stolen moments, risking everything? He kept quiet, but the words haunted him. That night, Marcus asked Javier to stay late again. The office was empty, the city lights casting long shadows across the floor. Marcus looked exhausted, his tie discarded, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw, "for dragging you into this mess." Javier shook his head. "You didn't drag me anywhere. I'm here because I want to be." Marcus's eyes softened, but the worry didn't leave them. "You don't know what it's like," he said. "This company, it's everything I've built. If I lose it, I lose everything." Javier stepped closer, his heart pounding. "You won't lose me," he said, the words fierce. "Whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." Marcus reached for him, pulling him into a kiss that felt like a lifeline. They sank into each other, the office fading away, the world reduced to the heat of their bodies and the quiet promises they made without words. But when they pulled apart, the reality crashed back in. "We can't keep doing this here," Marcus said, his voice low. "It's too risky. If someone finds out, then let them." Javier cut in, surprising himself. "I'm tired of hiding, Marcus. I've done it my whole life. I thought coming here to this city would mean I didn't have to anymore." Marcus looked at him, torn. "I want that too, but the board, they're old school. If they find out I'm—" He stopped, the word gay hanging unspoken between them. "They'll use it against me. I've seen what they do to people who don't fit their mold." Javier's chest ached, but he nodded. He knew the world Marcus lived in, boardrooms and power plays, where being out could be a weapon. But the thought of staying in the shadows, of pretending, made him feel like he was back in Texas, suffocating under the weight of who he couldn't be. "Let's take it one day at a time," Javier said finally. "But I'm not giving this up. Not unless you tell me to." Marcus's hand found his, squeezing tight. "Never," he whispered. The next day, disaster struck. A leaked email from a board member surfaced, questioning Marcus's commitment to Nexus Tech. The team was buzzing, and Javier felt the walls closing in. He wanted to confront Marcus, to demand they face this together. But Marcus was locked in meetings all day, his office a fortress Javier couldn't breach. By evening, Javier was a wreck, his mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. When Marcus finally emerged, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. "Not here. My place." Javier followed him to a sleek apartment in Nob Hill, all glass and steel, a world away from Javier's cramped studio. Inside, Marcus poured them both whiskey, his hand shaking slightly. "They're calling for a vote," he said, "to replace me." Javier's heart sank. "Because of the prototype?" Marcus shook his head. "Because of me. They think I'm unstable. They don't know about us, but they know something's off. And they're right. I can't focus. Not when I'm thinking about you every second." The words should have been a comfort, but they felt like a blade. Javier set his glass down, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "Then we fight. Together. You built this company, Marcus. They can't take it from you." Marcus looked at him, his eyes raw. "And if fighting means losing you?" "Because that's what it'll cost, Javier. If we go public, if I come out, it's over. My career, my reputation." Javier cut him off, stepping closer. "You think I care about your reputation? I care about you. The real you, not the CEO, not the suit. The guy who knelt in front of me and made me believe this was possible." For a moment, Marcus was silent, his eyes searching Javier's face. Then he pulled Javier close, his forehead resting against Javier's. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. Yes, you do, Javier said fiercely. And I'm not letting you face this alone. As they held each other, the city glittering outside, Javier knew the fight was just beginning. But for the first time, he felt ready. The boardroom was a battlefield, and Marcus was walking into it unarmed. Javier watched from the sidelines, his heart pounding as Marcus faced the investors, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying the storm inside. For Javier, every moment was a choice: stand by Marcus or stay safe in the shadows, and he was running out of time to decide. The vote was scheduled for the end of the week, a guillotine hanging over Marcus's head. Nexus Tech was in chaos, with rumors swirling and the team fracturing under the pressure. Javier tried to focus on his work, but every line of code felt like a distraction from the real fight. He and Marcus hadn't had a moment alone since the night at Marcus's apartment, and the distance was killing him. On Wednesday, Javier caught Marcus in the hallway, his face drawn. "You okay?" Javier asked, keeping his voice low. Marcus glanced around, ensuring they were alone. "No," he admitted, "but I have to be. For the team. For you." Javier's throat tightened. "You don't have to do this alone." Marcus's eyes softened, but before he could respond, Lena appeared, her expression curious. "Everything okay, boss?" she asked, her gaze flickering to Javier. "Yeah," Marcus said, his voice clipped. "Just discussing the prototype." Lena nodded, but her eyes lingered, and Javier felt the weight of her suspicion. He excused himself, his heart racing. The office felt like a minefield, every step a risk. That night, Javier went to Marcus's apartment uninvited, unable to stay away. Marcus opened the door, surprise flickering across his face. "Javier, what?" "I can't keep pretending," Javier cut in, stepping inside. "I'm done hiding. I know it's complicated, I know the risks, but I can't keep acting like you're just my boss." Marcus closed the door, his expression torn. "You think I want to? Every time I see you, I want to—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "But if we do this, if we're open, it's not just about us. It's the company, my career, your job." "I don't care about my job," Javier said, his voice fierce. "I care about you. About us." Marcus stared at him, and for a moment, Javier thought he'd pull away. But then Marcus crossed the room, pulling Javier into a kiss that felt like a vow. They fell into each other, the world outside fading, and for those hours, nothing else mattered. The next morning, reality hit hard. An anonymous email circulated among the team, hinting at inappropriate conduct by Marcus. It didn't name Javier, but the implications were clear. The office buzzed with whispers, and Javier felt eyes on him everywhere. Lena cornered him at lunch, her voice low. "Is there something going on with you and Marcus?" Javier's heart stopped. "What? No, that's—" He fumbled, his face burning. Lena raised an eyebrow. "I'm not stupid, Javier. I've seen the way he looks at you. Just be careful. This place eats people alive." Her words haunted him all day. By evening, he was a wreck, his mind spinning with fear and anger. He found Marcus in his office, staring at his computer, his face pale. "You saw the email," Javier said, closing the door. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "It's a warning shot. Someone knows, or they suspect." "Who?" Javier asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know. Could be anyone. The board, a rival, someone on the team." Marcus looked at him, his eyes raw. "I'm sorry, Javier. I never wanted you caught in this." Javier stepped closer, his voice fierce. "Don't apologize. We're in this together, remember?" Marcus's hand found his, a fleeting touch. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, "but I know I can't lose you." They stood there, the weight of the world pressing in, and Javier made a decision. "Then we fight," he said. "Not just for the company, but for us. No more hiding." Marcus looked at him, a spark of hope in his eyes. "You sure?" "More than I've ever been." The next day, Javier took a risk. He went to Lena, his heart pounding. "I need your help," he said, his voice low. "You're right. There's something between me and Marcus, and we're not ashamed of it." Lena's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. "Okay," she said slowly. What do you need? Someone to have our back, Javier said. The board's coming for him. If we're going to survive this, we need allies. Lena hesitated, then nodded. I'm in, but you're playing with fire, Javier. I know, he said, but it's worth it. As the vote loomed, Javier and Marcus prepared for battle, their love a quiet strength in the chaos. They didn't know if they'd win, but they knew they'd fight together. The boardroom was a crucible, and Javier felt the heat as he stood outside, waiting for Marcus to face the wolves. He'd never been more afraid, or more certain, that what they had was worth everything. But as the clock ticked down to the vote, the question wasn't just whether Marcus would keep his company, but whether they could keep each other. Javier spent the day rallying support. Lena had promised to talk to the team, to gauge who might stand with them. She came back at noon, her expression grim. Most people are on Marcus's side, she said. They respect him, but the board's got leverage. They're spinning this as a leadership failure, not you know. Javier nodded, his stomach churning. Thanks, Lena, for having our back. She gave him a small smile. You're not what I expected, Javier. Neither is he. You two are good together. The words warmed him, but the fear didn't fade. He found Marcus in his office, going over notes for the board meeting. You ready? Javier asked, his voice soft. Marcus looked up, his eyes tired but resolute. As I'll ever be. You. Javier stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm with you. Whatever happens. Marcus's hand brushed his, a fleeting touch that said everything. Thank you, he whispered. The board meeting was closed, but Javier waited outside, his heart in his throat. He could hear Ray's voices through the door, Marcus's steady and commanding, others sharp and accusing. Lena joined him, her presence a small comfort. He's fighting, she said. You can hear it. Javier nodded, but the wait was torture. When the door finally opened, Marcus emerged, his face unreadable. The board members filed out, their expressions cold, and Javier's heart sank. Well, he asked, his voice barely steady. Marcus took a deep breath. They're giving me a chance. 1 month to turn things around. Prove the prototype works. If I don't, he trailed off, but Javier knew. They can't take this from you, Javier said fiercely. We'll make it work. Marcus's eyes softened. He repeated, a small smile breaking through. I like the sound of that. That night, they worked side by side, pouring everything into the prototype. Javier's code was flawless, Marcus's vision sharp, and together, they were unstoppable. But the pressure was relentless, and the whispers didn't stop. Someone had leaked more rumors, this time hinting at a personal relationship, affecting Marcus's leadership. The team was divided, some loyal, some skeptical, and Javier felt the weight of every stare. He and Marcus stole moments when they could, a kiss in the stairwell, a whispered promise in the dark. But the secrecy was wearing them down. One night, as they lay in Marcus's apartment, Javier broke the silence. What if we just told them? Came out, showed them we're not ashamed. Marcus tensed, his arm tightening around Javier. I want to, he said. God, I want to. But the board, they'll tear me apart. And I can't let you get hurt. Javier sat up, his voice fierce. I'm already hurting, Marcus. Hiding who I am, who we are, it's killing me. I left Texas to be free. I'm not going back to that. Marcus looked at him, his eyes raw. I'm scared, he admitted, the word to confession. Not just of losing the company, of losing you. You won't, Javier said, pulling him close. But we can't keep living like this. We deserve more. Marcus nodded, his face pressed against Javier's shoulder. Okay, he whispered. We'll do it. Together. The next day, they made a plan. They'd finish the prototype, prove Marcus's leadership, and then come out. First to the team, then to the world. It was a risk, but it was theirs to take. Lena agreed to help, rallying key team members, and slowly they built a coalition. The prototype was coming together, a marvel of AI that could change the industry, and Javier felt a flicker of hope. But the night before the big presentation, disaster struck again. A rival company released a smear campaign. accusing Nexus Tech of unethical practices. The accusations were vague but damaging, and the board called an emergency meeting. Marcus was calm, but Javier saw the fear in his eyes. "We'll get through this," Javier said, gripping Marcus's hand. "We got this." Marcus nodded, but as they walked into the office, the weight of the fight settled over them. They were in love, they were in danger, and they were running out of time. The office was a war zone, and Javier and Marcus were soldiers fighting for more than just a company. They were fighting for their truth. The prototype was their last hope, a beacon in the storm. But as the board closed in, Javier wondered if love could survive the battlefield. Every line of code, every stolen kiss was a defiance, but defiance came at a cost. The emergency meeting was brutal. The board grilled Marcus, their questions sharp and relentless. Javier sat in the back, his presence barely tolerated, as accusations flew, mismanagement, distraction, even hints of the personal relationship rumors. Marcus stood tall, his voice unwavering, but Javier saw the cracks in his armor. When it was over, Marcus found Javier in the hallway, his face pale. "They're giving us one shot," he said. "Tomorrow's presentation. If the prototype doesn't impress, I'm out." Javier's heart pounded. "Then we make it perfect. We've got this." They worked through the night, the office a cocoon of code and coffee. Lena and a few loyal team members stayed, their support a lifeline. By dawn, the prototype was ready, a neural network that could predict market trends with uncanny accuracy. It was a masterpiece, but Javier knew it wasn't just about the tech. It was about proving Marcus was more than the rumors, more than the board's scapegoat. As the sun rose, Marcus pulled Javier aside, his eyes intense. "No matter what happens today, I need you to know I love you." The words hit Javier like a tidal wave. He'd felt it, known in every touch, but hearing it was different. "I love you too," he said, his voice breaking, "and we're not losing this." They kissed, quick and fierce, before heading into the presentation. The boardroom was packed, investors, team members, even a few reporters. Marcus stood at the front, his presence commanding, and Javier ran the demo from the back. The prototype performed flawlessly, graphs and predictions lighting up the screen, and the room buzzed with excitement. Javier watched Marcus, pride swelling in his chest. This was their moment. But then a board member, a gray-haired man named Ellison, stood. "Impressive," he said, his tone cold. "But we're here to discuss leadership, not just tech. There are concerns about your focus, Marcus. Personal concerns." The room went silent. Javier's heart stopped, his eyes locking with Marcus's. This was it, the moment they'd feared. Marcus took a breath, his gaze steady. "If you're referring to the rumors," he said, his voice clear, "then let's address them. Yes, I'm in a relationship with Javier Torres, a member of this team." Gasps rippled through the room. Javier felt every eye on him, but he didn't look away from Marcus. "I'm not ashamed of it," Marcus continued, "and I'm not distracted. If anything, Javier's made me better at this job, better at being human. If you want to judge me for my work, not my life." The room erupted, questions and murmurs overlapping. Ellison's face was stone, but Lena stood, her voice cutting through. "Marcus built this company," she said, "and Javier's code made this prototype possible. You want to talk focus? Look at what they've done together." The tide shifted. Team members spoke up, praising Marcus's leadership, Javier's brilliance. The reporters scribbled furiously, and Javier saw a flicker of hope in Marcus's eyes. When the board adjourned to deliberate, Marcus found Javier, his hand squeezing his. "You okay?" he asked. Javier nodded, his throat tight. "Proud of you." Marcus smiled, weary but real. "Proud of us." The board's decision came hours later. Marcus kept his position, but the vote was close, and the warning was clear: no more missteps. The prototype had saved them, but the battle wasn't over. That night, Javier and Marcus sat on Marcus's balcony, the city sprawling below. "We did it," Javier said, his voice soft. For now, Marcus replied, his hand finding Javier's. But it's not just about the company anymore. It's about us. Javier leaned against him, the weight of the day lifting. No more hiding. Marcus kissed his forehead. No more hiding. They stayed there, wrapped in each other, as the city hummed around them. The fight wasn't over, but they'd faced the worst together, and that was enough. The city stretched out below them, a tapestry of light and shadow, and Javier felt like he could finally breathe. They'd fought for their love, for their truth, and though the scars remained, they were stronger for it. In the quiet of that moment, Javier knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together, not as boss and employee, but as equals, bound by something deeper than fear. The weeks after the board meeting were a whirlwind. The prototype's success brought new investors, and Nexus Tech a stock soared. Marcus was hailed as a visionary, but he never let it go to his head. He and Javier were open now, their relationship no longer a secret, and though some whispers lingered, the team's respect held firm. Lena became their fiercest ally, organizing team dinners where Javier and Marcus could just be themselves, no pretense needed. But the world outside wasn't always kind. A few investors pulled out, citing values conflicts, and Marcus faced snide comments at industry events. Javier saw the toll it took, the way Marcus's smile faltered when he thought no one was looking. One night, as they lay in bed, Javier traced the lines of Marcus's face, his voice soft. "You ever regret it? Coming out?" Marcus turned to him, his eyes fierce. "Not for a second. You're worth it. This," he gestured between them, "is worth it." Javier kissed him, slow and deep, pouring everything into it. They'd built something real, something that could withstand the storms. But Javier knew the fight wasn't over. The world was changing, but not fast enough, and they'd have to keep pushing, keep proving that love was stronger than hate. One evening, Marcus surprised Javier with a trip to the coast. They drove to Half Moon Bay, the ocean stretching endless before them. Under the stars, Marcus took Javier's hand, his voice steady but emotional. "I spent years building walls," he said, "hiding who I was. But you tore them down. You made me brave." Javier's throat tightened. "You were already brave. I just reminded you." Marcus pulled a small box from his pocket, and Javier's heart stopped. "I don't know what the future holds," Marcus said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring. "But I know I want it with you. Marry me, Javier." Tears stung Javier's eyes as he nodded, unable to speak. They kissed, the ocean roaring around them, and Javier felt like he was home, not just in San Francisco, but in Marcus's arms. Back at Nexus Tech, they faced the future together. The company thrived, and Javier took on a bigger role, his name now tied to the prototype success. They navigated the challenges, board politics, industry bias, but they did it as a team, their love a quiet strength. Javier thought back to that night in the office, the click of the lock, the moment that changed everything. It was a dream he'd never dared to believe in, but it was real, and it was theirs. As they stood together at a company gala, hands entwined, Javier looked at Marcus, his heart full. "We did it," he whispered. Marcus squeezed his hand, his smile bright. "We're just getting started." And in that moment, with the city glittering around them, Javier knew they'd write their own story, one of love, courage, and a future they'd fight for, no matter the cost.